all of these insecurities, all of these doubts, especially at the doctorate level, I saw my classmates progressing a lot further than me. Why am I struggling so much? It was like, I need to be able to advocate for these individuals, like my neurospicy family.
Have you ever wondered what it would be like to release your inner unicorn? Dr. Jaime Raygoza is the founder of Rainbow Career Coaching, empowering Latinx and LGBTQ plus professionals and allies to achieve their career goals while maintaining well-being. A certified laughter yoga instructor, I want to hear more, and career transition expert. He combines holistic approaches with practical strategies to help clients overcome burnout, manage stress, and unlock their full potential. His signature philosophy, Unleash the Unicorn in You, emphasizes the authentic personal growth and professional development. I love that. Release the unicorn in you. Welcome, Dr. Regoza.
Well, thank you for having me here. I'm really excited, and let's dive in.
You yourself have ADHD, right? So I love
Mhm.
it when my guests can tell us a little bit about their ADHD journey to kind of start us out.
Yeah, definitely. So I was a late diagnosed. I was like diagnoser. I got diagnosed when 2 years ago. So I'm 33 now, so 31. Um, and before that, I always thought that I was lazy or that I just wasn't. Something was off because everybody else was doing things so easily. Things came to them, but I needed reminders. I needed special techniques to get myself grounded. And throughout school, like I was put in special ed classes. I was constantly tutored. I had a high school counselor that told me it's okay if you don't amount to be anything because like you're just not your brain just doesn't work that way. You're a little slow. And that was always my thing. You're slow because I just wasn't good in school. I was very hyperactive. I always, every single, like looking back, it all makes sense. But like back then, people were just saying, oh, um, you talk a lot in class. You're just the class clown. You like to, you know, like talk to everyone. Everybody wants to be your friend. That's distracting. You need to be less of yourself. And it was constantly, just a jab at me and my self-esteem and my self-worth. And it wasn't until, like I said, a few years ago, I was getting my doctorate degree and all of these insecurities, all of these doubts, especially at the doctorate level, I saw my classmates progressing a lot further than me. And once again, it came back and saying, like, why am I struggling so much? Maybe I'm just not meant to get this high. Maybe I reached my plateau. And I had a therapist that was very aware of like neurodivergence and that was his specialty. And he said, have you ever gotten diagnosed or like wanted to get to see if maybe you're neurodivergent? And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, because you have a lot of tendencies of someone who may be slightly autistic or even have ADHD and they're all in the spectrum, like it's under the same umbrella. And I was like, oh, no, like I've never even considered that as an option. Nobody ever, being Hispanic, that's not something that we talk about in the household. So after several tests and several like assessments, turns out I was on the severe level of ADHD, and then my therapist was like, I don't know how you survived thus far because like you're very high in the spectrum. So I started learning techniques. I started getting on Adderall, and my whole life changed. It was just like at first I was very angry because it's like this whole time I had something that had a name to it that would have made me feel more normal per se, or just like not crazy or not lazy. Um, but after a while, I settled with it, and now it's like it's my hidden superpower that I use now.
So much of that rings like true to me. And one of the things that you mentioned about, you kept on hearing the negative, the negative, the negative. And I remember, she could do so much better if she would just put her mind to it or,
Yes.
it's like, I Math is hard and I really have a hard time focusing, but if I was, trying a little bit harder, I would be able to do math much better. And it was just the frustration and then finding out that there is a reason for it and that you have not been less than all along, and it makes a big difference. And so what brought you then into your career choice?
So with that, because of how much I struggled to get to where I'm at, it always flustered me when like managers or teachers or whoever was in the sense of authority would give up on people because they didn't meet the norm, because they weren't trying hard enough, or they would call them lazy. So once I got my diagnosis, I was like, I need to be able to advocate for these individuals, like my neurospicy family, and like anybody who just categorizes themselves as different and doesn't fit into the mold of what society says should be professional, it should be good, and helping them find their true passion and seeing like, okay, if you don't fit here, let's find a place where you do fit and you feel like you can show every side of yourself authentically without being judged, without feeling, you know, like hurt or discriminated against. And I was surprised at how many other people shared that same experience that I did, but didn't have the help and didn't have the same realization that I did. So I was like, if I can save at least, not save, but if I at least can help one person not go with what I went through, then I'm making the world a better place.
And I'm curious, you work with LGBTQ. I'm assuming that you are part of that
Hmm.
community as well, and Latino. So when you were in school, you had ADHD. You
Hmm.
were already in a minority when it came to sexual orientation, and then I don't know what school system you went to, but I'm assuming you were probably a minority as far as culture goes as well.
Yeah, there was so I went to school in LA County. So I there was a good mix of like Latino in there, but even within that, it was shame if you spoke Spanish in school, shame if you know, didn't assimilate and tried to do what everybody else did. And anybody who was speaking Spanish was considered lesser than, and like the more assimilated you were, the better you were. So I didn't come out to like as gay until like college because I just felt unsafe in my high school. Like I couldn't even I remember this very distinctly. I used to love Spanish music growing up. My mom used to play that was like her jam every time. Every Sunday she would clean the household, put her Spanish music on. So you start like feeling nostalgia every time you hear it. Um, so when my friends were like sharing like what our favorite artists were, and I could not relate to any of the artists that they had because all of mine were these Spanish artists, they were looking at me weird. And one person flat out told me, like, I don't think that we can be friends because we don't like the same things. And like you need to like start listening. And then like she pulled me aside. And she's like, if you want to be part of this group, you need to start listening to more English music and more things like us because we don't like your type of music and you don't like what you do. And this is coming from another Hispanic like individual, So it's like the fact that I had to shut down my culture just to fit in was insane. Not knowing I was neurodivergent, not wanting to come out as gay, so I felt like I had to hide so many parts of me to succeed or to fit the norm, just to get by, so that I wouldn't feel judged or discriminated.
Wow. You had it coming from all angles, didn't you? And so
So
then
yeah.
people wonder, like people who are not neurodiverse. So, well, just, our neurotypical peers, they have no idea what the mask is. But boy, you must have had a fantastic mask that you wore.
Yeah, and I didn't realize that until like later on, but you put this mask on, like the masking is so real, and where you're trying to assimilate and you're trying to be that version that everybody else likes so that you can fit in, but you feel so empty inside because it's not you. And when you finally feed somebody else that lowers their mask, and you're like, oh, I didn't know that was an option. Like, I can be that weird, like, nerdy person that like just fixates on whatever, like what? That's an option. It changes your whole life set.
Well, and I have to tell you a funny story about my daughter. I think you'll appreciate that. Just brought that up to me. Is um, she was very she was very confused about her sexuality at one point, and she said, "I remember my junior year, somebody told me they were bisexual," and she said, "What? That's an option? I didn't know." I
Because you
know the
don't know
same
what you don't know.
exactly, and so then there is an option to be your authentic self, but finding the right population of people to do it with sometimes can be a challenge.
Yeah, and it's hard because like, especially when we're younger, I think we care a lot about what other people think. And I would always get the advice from older individuals saying, like, you're going to be at the happiest when you stop caring what other people think. And I never fully understood that until like I got into my late 20s, early 30s. And when it finally clicked, and I'm like, oh, when I start just being myself and not caring, and that's their opinion, that's their insecurities, that's whatever, like, mold they want to fit in, but I don't fit in the same lifestyle that they have.
Nor do you want to, quite
Yeah.
frankly, because it's not
Hmm.
comfortable there. Like, I've tried to fit into that box, and I find it to be quite uncomfortable. So
No, yeah. And it's something that it's just hard for one, especially being neurodivergent, because I like being on the severe spectrum of ADHD. I am on the hyperactivity where it's literally that cartoon squirrel, and then you like look and you're like, what's going on? Like yesterday, I have a group of five really, really close ADHD friends. Um, and a conversation with us is insane because we are having like one topic, and within 5 minutes, we probably dabbled into 30 different topics, not knowing how we got there. But we're still having like a ball of a time, and it's just like all over the place. But because we all work the same way, we can follow along that pattern of conversation without even batting an eye.
yeah, I've often said I think that ADHD kind of makes you a little Italian.
I love that.
Just everybody talks over the top of each other, high speed. You hear the conversation that's going on over here, but you're in this conversation, then all of a sudden you're like, I'm sorry. And then you have to say something into this conversation.
Yes, and everything kind of triggers a memory or like a statement or something, and you're like, oh yeah, like I know about this. Oh no, but yeah, I also know about that. And then it's like you start getting into like so excited about it.
And I don't know about you, but I myself, I really love to, like when we're in a party atmosphere or whatever, I like to sit myself right in the middle
Hmm.
of the table because I want to hear everything that's going on. I get very frustrated if I'm at one end of the table because I feel like I am missing out on what's going on at the other.
Oh yeah, oh yeah, and it's very common. I've noticed that people say that neurodivergents are usually the glue of the group because you are so relatable to everyone. And like a lot of people say, I don't know how you can like just be in five different conversations all at once and still be able to keep like all of that knowledge in you. And it's just like that's just our little secret power. We a little bit is the masking, but also the interest. We have multiple facets, and it's to our own detriment because you can see my closet. I have so many different like started projects that I haven't finished, but I mastered it. I got bored, and then on to the next. But because of it, like there's so many things I can talk about.
Well, and I did a podcast with my son-in-law one time, and we talked about that very thing and hobby hoarding. Essentially, you got these little hobbies, these little trails of hobbies that left behind you. And I said, I don't really leave the trail behind me. A lot of times, I circle back to them, so it's kind
Hmm.
of a big circle that I go in, and I, kind of come back to them. So if I don't get rid of all of the stuff, you never know, 10 to 15 years from now, it may become my jam again.
Hmm. Yeah, it's true. And I've made that mistake. Like for me, the thing that keeps circling around is like crocheting. I will buy like the crochet needles and I'll buy all the different sizes, all the wonderful colors of yarn, and I'll start crocheting like hats and sweaters and blankets. I'll get bored, I'll leave it, and then I'll eventually donate it to Goodwill or something. And then like 2 years later, I'm like, why did I get rid of that stuff? Let me go do it again. And then I buy it again. So now I have like a set that's just been sitting there, but I know I'm gonna go back to.
Well, we talked about like we could do seasons. Like I think that sewing, I do my quilting, but I like to sew and quilt in the fall and winter,
That's true.
right? And so I kind of ignore it in the summer and the spring. And I have a lot of hobbies that are really very seasonal as well. And when we talked about it, we talked about like recognizing that the process is really what's more important than the actual thing that you get at the end, and enjoying that process. But by putting it into seasons and saying, I don't have to do this right now, it allows you to walk away with it from it without guilt.
Yep. No, and it's true. It's very true. Last year I got into a big obsession in running. So I got the audacity that I'm gonna run a marathon. I accomplished it, but like all my friends this year, thank you. All my friends this year, they're like, "Oh, Jaime's a really like avid runner. He trains all the time." And I was like, "No, that was last year." I was just like, "This year I'm into cycling." So
It's last year's Jamie. This year's
yeah.
Jamie doesn't like that anymore.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like even like we do that with like I don't know if you've had this, but with food. Sometimes you have an obsession with the same staple food, and they're like that's the only thing you dream about, you crave. But then after a certain time, you're like, ugh, that's not. I never want to eat it again. I'm done. And then a few
It's
months later,
sitting
you're
in your
like,
cupboard for months and months
yes.
because the last time you bought it, you bought too much. It it just sits there, and then months later, you're like, I, I told my husband actually last night. I said I'm going to get rid of some of our "we're fooling ourselves" food. You know, we're never going to eat it.
Yeah, and you have to be honest with yourself because yeah, it's hard. Like I went into a Pop Tart phase because I was like I'd never had these when I was young, so I bought so many Pop Tarts. It was like insane. And then like after like a month, I just could not look at them, but I still have boxes there.
And they'll be there for a very, very long time. You may come back to them, you may, but I find with food, I don't come back to the food very often, and if I do, it's a long time later.
By that time they're expired. So
Well, yeah, because we eat it, we get hyper focused on the flavor, the whatever. The only thing food wise that I've been able to consistently say has been a thing in my life is coffee.
yeah, yeah, I hear you.
Absolutely. Coffee I have loved since I was 5 years old, and I'm not giving it up ever.
Yeah, and my psychiatrist did tell me that one of the reasons that we tend to like lean in with coffee is because it relaxes our mind because stimulants work differently. Like for the neurotypical, it gets you really hyper and everything, versus for us, it's more of a depressant. It balances us out, so it makes us feel like more calm, which is ironic because that's not the reason people drink coffee.
Oh yeah, have you ever had to have a caffeine nap?
Yes, all the time. People always look at me weird. They're like, "You just drank a triple shot espresso and you just took like a fat nap. Like, what is wrong with you?"
Exactly. Exactly. You're going to be, we're going to bed soon. It's like, yeah, that's fine. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Because, and I find like there's like a primo, you can get just enough caffeine that it does like gives you what you need, and you're good to go. You get too much, you get sleepy.
Yeah,
If you get not enough, it doesn't do much for you except for make you go to the bathroom. So
yeah. It's a blend. It has to be like a perfect blend in there.
it's a very small window there. You have
Oh
to know
yeah.
exactly what you're doing.
Yeah. That's why it's like, just make my own coffee at home because if I get it out there, I don't know what kind of version of me is going to be out there.
Yeah, and I'm always like an extra shot. Give me an extra shot.
Hmm.
Um, so I'm really curious. honestly, when I read your bio and I've been looking at your webpage, and I love the idea that you are just like taking on stress. Like that's you're like, screw it. Nobody needs to be stressed out. Nobody needs to be burned out. You're This is just silly. And I love that. And I also am dying to know about laughter yoga.
Yeah, of course. So, I've dealt with so much stress, and especially people who are neurodivergent are 10 times more likely to experience burnout than the neurotypical because we think faster, we process things faster, we obsess over things, fixate over things a lot more than the average individual. So because of that, we're more likely, if unregulated and like not, we don't manage ourselves to burn out and stress out. Um, we are perfect workers because when we fixate on something that we like, and if that's our job, we will do fantastic at it. And people are like, we need more of them, but it's kind of like a car. Only you can only go for so long without refilling for gas, and getting like your engine checked and all of that stuff. So same thing. So I teach a lot of my clients and even myself, like, what are some techniques to avoid burnout? So when like based on the life that you're living, what are your stressors? How are you managing your stressors? How are you releasing that from your body? And I did a lot of research, and even in my doctorate degree, I focused a lot on burnout and motivation. So one of the things that science showed is that laughter is one of the easiest, freest, and um, most effective techniques to release stress. And it's our body's natural way of release of decreasing stress hormones in our bloodstream and providing dopamine and serotonin in our brain, giving those feel good feelers. So I found out about laughter yoga, which was invented in India in 1995 by this wonderful man named Dr. Madan Kataria. And basically, it's a mixture of yogic breathing and intentional laughter where you laugh for no reason and but you mix it in with like the meditation and the grounding work of yoga. So you're not in a pretzel, I promise you. So you're not going to be like over here entangled, but you are doing like meditative breathing and laughing instead of just exhaling. And we do some silly things where you kind of tap into your curiosity and your imagination and just really fulfill that inner child and reintroduce play into your life.
That's really awesome. When I was in college, I took a class called Health and Humor.
Mm,
And it was kind of, laughter is the best medicine kind of thing in a lot of ways. Um, and, you know, there are actual physiological, not just psychological, physiological things that laughter does for our body. It allows us to clear out our lungs. It gets our blood moving. It releases dopamine and serotonin. It does all kinds of physical things. And it is also a lot like physical activity in the standpoint that it doesn't matter if you're really laughing, although really laughing does help. I mean, because we all love to laugh, but it doesn't matter if you're really laughing or not, you're still getting those benefits. Same
yeah.
with exercise. It doesn't matter if you're enjoying that exercise or not. You are still getting the dopamine, baby. You know,
Oh yeah.
you're still getting no matter what. And so I find it interesting that you could still get those benefits based on just doing the physical activity of going through the motions of laughter.
Yeah. And it can even taking it one step further, even just the fact of smiling can trick the brain into having start producing that serotonin and dopamine. So I tell people, even if you don't feel like you can laugh at that single moment, smile. Smile and just breathe in and breathe out as you're smiling. And if you can even let out a small little chuckle, like that will start triggering the effect. And laughter is very contagious. Like especially when you're in the group, it's hard. I've had people like where they start crying because it's an outlet for other emotions to start going in because they're finally allowing themselves to feel something. I think especially with everything that's going on in the world, it's easy for us to get numb, hearing all the news and hearing all everything. So we have to allow ourselves to feel things and not feeling guilty for feeling good and for allowing us to feel joy and embrace laughter.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And as you're saying that, I'm thinking, I do a lot of breath work as far as when I coach my clients in not in like the breathing in, breathing out, doing which I could, but what I mean with breath work is taking that pause when something is happening and taking a breath. And what you said, adding a little chuckle would be, I'm going to start saying, take a deep breath, smile, take a deep breath, try to give a chuckle, see what it does. Because I think that breath is so important, but adding those two components would be is so intense, I think.
Oh yeah, and I work with clients that are very, very stressed out, and sometimes to the point where they're having physiological issues. Like I have one client that her throat shut down. I've had another client that literally got diabetes because of their stress. So their insulin levels went high, and I have another client that lost so much weight because of the stress. So figuring out like how you can do little micro steps in there to alleviate all of that trauma their body experience from the stress makes a big, big difference. And it takes what, 30 days to create a habit, 90 days to enforce it. So just doing a little bit of laughs here and there. Like one thing that I always do for me is I wake up, I shower. And as I'm showering, I tell myself for the first 5 minutes as I'm like soaking up the hot water, just giggle. And I just start like giggling. And my cat, I live with a cat. She probably thinks I'm insane because she always like comes over and she's like meowing. She's like, "What the heck are you doing?" Now she's like, "Whatever, he's just crazy." But like I giggle and it just like makes me laugh, and it just like it's a really good way of starting my day, and you're setting good intentions for the rest of the day.
Absolutely. I have, and I always have used laughter as just a tool in general. Um, and I guess like now you're bringing it to a different perspective. I tried really hard when I was stressed out and burning out in my career to see the humor in it. It was difficult. It was, and I probably could have used a coach like you at that time because I ended up retiring about 5 months early because I couldn't handle the stress anymore. Didn't make it.
Yeah, I mean it happens. And the thing is just being able to give yourself grace too, because sometimes it's just so much and we feel that we should know better and we should have handled this better. But you didn't know what you know. You're a different version of you. You're more educated. You're more enlightened now than you were before. So giving grace to your past self and saying, you did the best you can, but at least you got me where I'm at now.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I seriously, I look back on those last few months of my job and I knew that I had ADHD and I knew how it was affecting how I was doing my work. And I was frustrated.
Yeah, I get that. And I've been there too. I think it's easy for us to start comparing like our lives with other people, especially when you think things come so easy to them. And I've had the opposite effect too, where I've had coworkers that felt they weren't good enough because like Jaime over here is completing assignments or completing like this thing like in a day when it's taking me a week. But then they're not seeing that I'm struggling with social cues or I'm struggling with, in these meetings or how like I daze out sometimes and you have to repeat 7 times to me because I was processing something else. Like everybody's going through something, neurodivergent or neurotypical. And I think the more we compare, the worse it's gonna get. It's like everybody's in a different journey. Everybody's going to be doing things differently. One quote that was told to me a long time ago that really changed my perspective on that was, we're all going on this uphill battle, but the thing is that we all start with different backpacks. So some of us have backpacks with 4 or 5 stones, and that could be like our neurodiversity. It could be like, our sexual orientation. It can be our race or whatever. And some of us start with an empty backpack. However, as we go up the hill, people place stones in our bags. It could be trauma, it could be stress, it can be, you know, whatever it is at different adversities, but you don't never see what's inside another person's backpack. So never judge how heavy like their backpack is because they can be on top, but they started with a lighter load. But then eventually you'll notice that you surpassed them because you gained endurance because you started with the heavier load at the beginning. So you were slow and steady, but so everybody's in a different thing and it's not a race. We're all trying to reach the top, but we're all going to get there at our own pace. But if you can support each other along the way and help each other and teach them how to be able to endure the load that they have or even lessen the load, then why not?
So I have used the backpack analogy as well. And I would take it a step further and talk about the fact that we as individuals also at some point in our lives can decide what rocks we continue to carry.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of stuff that people put in our backpacks.
That don't belong in there.
They don't belong there. They're not for us. And then there's stuff, we find ourselves picking up those rocks and throwing them in their backpack too. And it's like, why are you collecting other people's rocks?
Yeah, we make our life a little bit harder and we think that we're helping them, but we're hurting ourselves at the same time.
Exactly. Is there a way to get the rock out of their backpack without putting it in your backpack? That's the question. Can we just lose the rock?
Exactly. It's like, why do we need to carry it to begin with?
Exactly. Is this even worthy of being carried?
Yeah, and a lot of that is like doing that self-reflection and asking yourself, like, is this even serving me anymore? Maybe you got that habit in the past because you were in survival mode, but now that you're in thriving mode, is that even necessary?
Mm-hmm. And that's when you start pulling them out, start pitching them. So
Exactly.
Well, Jaime, we are coming to the end of our time. And I always like to ask one more question of my new guests to give you the last word, essentially. And so my question for you is, if people were going to take away one thing from our conversation today, what do you want to tell a little bit more about that thing?
We talked about so many good things today. I would say that no matter where you're at, whether you're diagnosed, undiagnosed, curious about if that is something that you do have, give yourself grace. Go ahead and just, even if you're curious about getting diagnosed or thinking that you might have ADHD, just go take the test. Worst case scenario, you have peace of mind that that may not be the thing that's making life a little bit more icky or hard. But if you get diagnosed and it finds out that you get the test and you find out you're diagnosed, it will really alleviate like your heart. It will make you feel less of burden on yourself. And now the only way to tackle a monster is by naming it. And once you name it, you know where to go from that point.
Well, thank you again, Jaime. We've had a great conversation, and I've really enjoyed getting to know you.
Likewise.
And for our butterflies on the wall, if they enjoyed what they were listening to and they like what they hear, we always want to remind them to like, subscribe, and do all those things. And comment, tell us what you think. And if you have any questions or comments or concerns for Dr. Regoza, all of this information will be in the link down below. And with that, we'll see you next time.